What would you do if a billionaire grandmother, a woman who had spent her whole life commanding boardrooms and signing off on fortunes bigger than some country's GDP, suddenly broke down in tears in the middle of a greasy little diner over nothing more than a tarnished silver necklace hanging off a tired waitress's neck? That's where this story begins, in a place nobody would expect, with a moment that cracked open 30 years of secrets and turned strangers into family. Or enemies. Her name was Margaret Sinclair. At 82, she was still the iron-willed head of Sinclair Holdings, the kind of woman who could move markets with a single phone call. She had a reputation for being unshakable, cold even, but once a month she broke her own rules. She'd dismiss her driver slip into a simple town car and have lunch at a corner diner in Brooklyn, the place where she and her late husband Robert had shared their very first date back when they were broke dreamers. For Margaret, that diner was a time capsule and a wound she couldn't quite close. She sat alone in her favorite booth, running her finger along the rim of her water glass, remembering Robert stealing fries off her plate. The clatter of plates around her faded until a voice cut through. "More water, ma'am." Margaret looked up. The waitress couldn't have been more than 28, brown hair, pulled back uniform neat, but worn thin. Her name tag said Claire. There was kindness in her eyes, but also exhaustion, the kind that comes from too many double shifts and too little money. And then Margaret saw it. As Claire leaned forward, the lamplight caught the chain around her neck. A delicate silver locket shaped like a 5-pointed star. Margaret's heart stopped. Her manicured hand flew to her throat. That necklace. No, it couldn't be. There was only one in the world. Robert had it custom made for their 10th anniversary. Margaret had passed it down to her only daughter Anna before she stormed out of the house 3 decades ago and never came back. Margaret's voice cracked. "That necklace, where did you get it?" Claire froze, hand going to the star instinctively. It was my mother's," she said quietly. "She passed it down to me." "Why?" Margaret's breath came shallow, her whole body trembling. "What? What was your mother's name?" The young woman blinked, confused. "Anna Reed. She died when I was 23. The name hit Margaret like a physical blow. 30 years of silence. Private investigators who came up empty nights spent staring at an empty nursery. It all came crashing down. This wasn't a stranger. This was her granddaughter. The ride back to the Sinclair estate was a blur. Claire sat stiffly in the back seat of a Rolls-Royce she didn't belong in, clutching the locket. Margaret, usually a master of composure, stared out the window, her eyes rimmed with tears. Inside the sprawling stone mansion, the butler Charles looked on with concern as Margaret led Claire into the grand library. Books stretched floor to ceiling, and above the fireplace hung a portrait of Robert, smiling, alive, young. Margaret sank into a chair. "That locket," she whispered, "was mine. Robert had it made. There's only one like it in the world. Did you ever open it?" Claire hesitated. "My mother told me never to. She said it would only bring questions I wasn't ready for." But with Margaret urging her on, Claire clicked it open. Inside was a faded photograph, Robert and Margaret laughing in their youth. Opposite the photo, an inscription, "To my Polaris forever, R.S." Claire's face drained of color. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Polaris," she whispered. "He always called me his North Star. I gave that locket to my daughter Anna. She was your mother. The dam broke." Margaret told her everything, how Anna had fallen in love with a musician named Daniel, a man with no money, no prospects. How Margaret, terrified for her daughter's future, had forbidden it. The fight was brutal. Anna screamed, "You care more about your money than me," and left never to return. Margaret had believed she was gone forever. And now sitting across from her was proof Anna had lived, loved, and left behind a daughter. Claire sat there reeling. All her life her mother had told her the family was gone, that there was nothing left but the two of them. She had died with that lie. And now Claire was staring at a grandmother she never knew existed. But not everyone welcomed her. The library doors burst open. Margaret's son, Gregory Sinclair, the current CEO of Sinclair Holdings, stepped in with his wife Vanessa on his arm. Gregory's sharp features twisted with suspicion. Vanessa's diamonds glittered under the chandelier as her cold eyes swept over Claire's diner uniform. Mother Gregory said flatly, "What is this Charles said you brought home a waitress?" Margaret's voice shook but held firm. "This is Claire Reed. She is Anna's daughter, my granddaughter." The room froze. Gregory laughed bitterly. "Anna's been gone 30 years. Now you expect me to believe this woman just appears conveniently with a sob story and a piece of jewelry. This is a scam, an obvious one." Vanessa's lips curled into a practiced smile. "Darling, don't be upset. It happens all the time. Desperate people trying to worm their way into wealthy families. But don't worry, we'll settle this quickly. A DNA test. That's the only proof we'll accept." Margaret's face softened as she turned to Claire. "I know who you are. I feel it. But for their sake, for yours, will you agree?" Claire swallowed hard, thinking of her little boy Leo waiting at home. A DNA test meant stepping into a world she never asked for. But she lifted her chin. "Fine, do it. You'll see I'm not lying." The next week was a nightmare. Claire and Leo moved into the Sinclair mansion where every hallway felt like a courtroom. Margaret showered Leo with affection, but Gregory and Vanessa circled like vultures, their disdain sharp as knives. Behind the scenes, they hired a private investigator to dig up dirt. When they found nothing, they paid a man to lie, swearing Claire had once tried to bribe him after a car accident. When the DNA results finally came, the truth was undeniable. 99.9% probability. Claire was Margaret's granddaughter. Relief flooded Margaret's face as she embraced Claire and Leo. But before the warmth could spread, Vanessa pounced, waving a folder. "Not so fast," she sneered. "We looked into her past. She's a liar. A drunk. She tried to bribe her way out of a DUI. Margaret faltered, her faith shaken for just a moment. That hesitation cut Claire deeper than any insult. "You believe them?" she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "After everything, you believe them?" And with that, she grabbed Leo's hand and fled. Her heart shattered. Upstairs, packing her things, Claire found a battered box of her mother's belongings. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Margaret. Letters begging forgiveness, announcing her pregnancy, pleading for help when Daniel grew sick. Letters that never reached their destination. And in one, the cruel truth: Anna had left countless messages with Gregory's office. He had intercepted them all. He had lied to both sides, ensuring Anna believed she'd been disowned and that Margaret believed her daughter had vanished. He had destroyed his own sister's life to secure his inheritance. Margaret stormed into Claire's room just as she finished the last letter. When she read it herself, her face crumbled, then hardened into pure fury. She marched downstairs, found Gregory lounging in the main hall, and slapped him across the face so hard the sound echoed. "You," she hissed. You let your sister die alone. You let me grieve for 30 years while you played puppet master. You are no son of mine." Gregory's mask shattered. He stammered excuses, claiming he'd been protecting the family, but the truth was laid bare. His greed had killed his own sister. Margaret's verdict was swift. Get out. You and your wife. Out of this house. Out of this family. You will inherit nothing. Not 1 cent. And just like that, Gregory and Vanessa were stripped of everything power, wealth, legacy. They walked out with nothing but their pride and the knowledge that the world would soon know the truth. What followed wasn't about lawyers or fortunes, it was about healing. Margaret Claire and little Leo spent their days together in the gardens, at the chessboard, rediscovering what it meant to be family. Margaret gave Claire the star locket, fastening it around her neck with trembling hands. It was mine, then Anna's. Now it's yours. Not as a reminder of what we lost, but as a promise of what we found. The mansion, once cold and hollow, filled with laughter again. Leo's giggles echoed through the halls. Claire sketched portraits in her mother's old style, and Margaret at long last allowed herself to smile, not as a billionaire, not as a business titan, but as a grandmother who had finally come home. And yet, as happy as that ending sounds, the question lingers. Should Margaret be forgiven for casting Anna out in the first place? Should Gregory's betrayal erase him forever from the family? Or does blood demand second chances, even when it's poisoned? Tell me, if it were you, would you forgive? Or are some betrayals too deep to ever come back from? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and pass it on to someone who believes family is the only treasure that matters.